The Red Cross ship moved quietly through space, glowing with the familiar white and red symbols that every species recognized. These symbols meant safety. They meant help. They meant that the people inside were healers, not fighters. The ship was part of a humanitarian convoy sent from Earth to the colony world Hestara, a planet caught in the middle of a growing conflict. Many people were hurt there, humans and aliens both, and Earth wanted to make sure innocent lives were saved. Doctors, nurses, engineers, and volunteers filled the ship. They weren't carrying weapons. They carried bandages, medicine, food, and hope. Dr. Lena Arkwright stood by one of the windows, watching the stars pass by like tiny sparks. She had worked with the Red Cross for years and had seen disasters before, but something felt different this time. A strange tension filled the air. She could not explain it, but her heart felt heavy, as if warning her of something she couldn't see. Still, she pushed the thought away. Their mission was important, and fear had no place in the minds of those who were there to save others. The rest of the crew worked calmly, preparing the medical bay and checking supplies. They talked softly about the situation on Hestara, where hospitals were overwhelmed by casualties from battles happening too close to civilian areas. No one expected danger to the convoy because every faction had agreed that Red Cross ships were neutral. Everyone respected them. Everyone allowed them to pass safely. It had been a universal rule for hundreds of years. With this belief, the convoy moved toward the planet. There were 5 ships in total, a main medical ship, 2 supply carriers, a communication vessel, and a small escort craft. Even the escort ship had only defensive shields, no offensive weapons. It existed simply to guide the convoy through asteroid fields or communication dead zones. They had no reason to expect trouble. Then, without warning, the radar officer froze. His eyes widened as he stared at the screen. Unidentified ships appeared, moving fast, too fast. They came from behind a ring of icy debris, hidden until the last moment. The officer's voice trembled as he reported the readings. The shapes of the incoming vessels did not match any registered allies. There were no communication signals, no identification codes, nothing that suggested a peaceful approach. Dr. Lena felt her stomach twist. She heard alarms begin to ring through the hallway as the captain ordered all crew to take emergency positions. Some of the younger volunteers panicked, asking if they should hide or if the ships would scan their Red Cross markings and back off. The captain tried to calm them, saying that no one would attack a medical convoy. Not in this age. Not with these symbols painted so clearly on every hull. But the enemy ships did not slow down. They locked onto the Red Cross vessels with weapons charged. A few seconds later, bright streaks of energy tore through space and struck the communication ship first. It exploded in front of everyone's eyes, its pieces scattering like burning confetti. The shockwave rocked the other ships, knocking people off their feet. Dr. Lena crashed against a wall but forced herself up again, her heart racing. The medical ship tried to broadcast a distress call, repeating over and over that they were non-combatant and carrying wounded supplies. The call went unanswered. The attackers kept firing, hitting the supply carriers next. The lights flickered as systems failed. Flames burst from the hallways. People ran, coughing and screaming, trying to help the injured even while the ship was still being shot at. Lena rushed to the medical bay to help stabilize falling crew members. Explosions shook the floors. She could hear metal twisting and breaking apart. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she kept pushing it down. She had to save at least someone. She had to try. The captain's voice came through the speakers, rough and fading. He ordered everyone who could reach the escape pods to do so. The attackers were not stopping, and the ship could not survive much longer. Through the windows, Lena could see one of the supply ships splitting into 2, its pieces drifting away, burning silently. As she helped load an injured volunteer into an escape pod, she realized the truth. This attack was no accident. Whoever these attackers were, they had planned this. They had waited for the convoy. They had targeted healers on purpose. Moments later, Lena climbed into a pod herself. The hatch sealed, and the pod shot away from the dying medical ship. She watched in horror as the once bright, peaceful convoy turned into a field of fire and debris. In that moment, she understood that the universe had changed. Someone had crossed a line that had never been crossed before. And Earth would not forget. Dr. Lena Arkwright's escape pod drifted through the dark space, far away from the burning remains of the Red Cross convoy. She sat strapped in her seat, shaking, breathing fast, trying to understand what had just happened. Only hours ago, she and her team had been preparing medical kits, checking patient beds, and talking about how they would help people on Hestara. Now, almost everyone she had worked with was gone. The screams, the exploding lights, and the sound of tearing metal still echoed in her mind like they were happening again. The escape pod was small and had limited controls. She pressed the emergency beacon switch, hoping someone, anyone, would hear it. A soft green light blinked, showing the signal was active. She leaned back and closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks as she remembered the smiling faces of the volunteers who had been excited about saving lives. They had come with hope and kindness, not guns or soldiers. And yet, someone had attacked them on purpose. Hours passed slowly. The pod floated through the silence, bumping slightly every now and then as it moved through tiny pieces of debris from the destroyed ships. Lena tried not to look outside, but the view kept drawing her eyes. The stars were beautiful, but the drifting chunks of metal reminded her of the nightmare she had survived. She knew other escape pods might also be out there, and she prayed that someone else had made it out alive. Finally, her pod screen lit up with a signal. The Terran Alliance rescue ship Aurora had detected her beacon. Lena's heart jumped with relief. She watched as the Aurora grew larger in the window, its bright lights cutting through the darkness. When the rescue team pulled her inside, she almost collapsed from exhaustion. The medical staff on the Aurora placed her on a stretcher and checked her for injuries. Her hands were trembling, and her voice cracked when she tried to speak. They asked her questions. What happened? How many ships attacked? Did they communicate? But she could barely answer. Shock weighed heavily on her chest. Still, she forced herself to tell them everything she remembered. The rescuers looked horrified. They had never heard of anyone attacking a Red Cross convoy before. When the Aurora returned to Earth, Lena was greeted not by celebration, but by a wall of silence and grief. Photos of the fallen aid workers covered the screens in the landing bay. Families waited with tearful eyes, hoping for survivors, but very few pods had been recovered. Lena felt guilty that she was alive when so many others weren't. She didn't know how to face the families, so she kept her eyes down and walked with the officers who escorted her to the Earth Defense Secretariat, an agency that handled high-level security incidents. Inside a conference room, important officials and military leaders waited for her. They spoke gently, asking her to describe the attack again. This time, she told them more clearly. She told them how the enemy ships appeared suddenly, how they aimed directly at the Red Cross symbols, how they shot without warning, how the communication ship exploded first, how the attackers never responded to any peaceful messages. Every person in the room looked shocked, confused, and angry. For centuries, every species in space had agreed that medical ships were untouchable. No one harmed healers, no matter how hostile the conflict. It was an unbreakable promise shared across cultures and worlds. The moment Lena finished speaking, the news spread. Screens across Earth played her recorded testimony. People watched her tearful face as she described the ambush. Across the world, anger burned like wildfire. Millions demanded justice. Social media filled with messages honoring the lost medics and condemning the unknown attackers. Even alien ambassadors contacted Earth, expressing fury at such a violation. Many had their own versions of the Red Cross and understood the importance of protecting those who healed the wounded. Almost every species stood with Earth, declaring that the attack was unforgivable. Meanwhile, analysts studied the wreckage collected by rescue teams. They examined scorch marks, weapon signatures, and fragments of enemy ships. Soon, they discovered clues, pieces of metal and engine parts that matched technology used by the Korth Dominion, a powerful and aggressive alien empire. The findings spread quickly, adding fuel to the fire. Lena watched all this unfold from a quiet room in a recovery center. She rarely slept, haunted by memories of the burning ships and the faces of her friends. But she knew one thing for sure: her survival meant she had a responsibility to speak, to tell the truth. to make sure the galaxy understood what had happened. And the galaxy listened. Her voice became the spark that ignited a storm that Earth and its allies were not going to ignore. The attack had been meant to silence healers. Instead, it awakened something powerful. After Dr. Lena's testimony spread across Earth and its allied worlds, a massive investigation began. The Terran Alliance did not want revenge without proof. They wanted the truth, clear, solid, and undeniable. The Intelligence Division took charge, gathering every piece of wreckage recovered from the destroyed Red Cross convoy. Engineers, scientists, and analysts worked day and night in silent labs filled with glowing screens and scattered metal fragments. The first clue came from a twisted piece of armor plating found attached to the medical ship's hull. It carried small traces of an alloy that was not commonly used in most known fleets. Only a few empires manufactured it, and one of them was the Korth Dominion. The Korth were known for being aggressive, proud, and stubborn. They rarely followed treaties unless forced. Still, they had never attacked medics before, which made the situation confusing. Another clue came from energy signatures. Every weapon in the galaxy left a special pattern, a kind of fingerprint. When the scientists analyzed the scorch marks on the Red Cross ship, they found a match that pointed again to the Korth Dominion's warships. The pattern was too distinct to be a coincidence. It was like finding a criminal's fingerprint at a crime scene. But the Terran Alliance wanted more than just metal pieces and burn marks. They needed undeniable evidence. So they expanded their search to include satellite recordings from nearby systems. Many satellites monitored borders, trade routes, and space lanes. One of them belonged to a mining corporation on a nearby moon. When the investigators requested its footage, they found something shocking. The recording showed a fleet of ships moving quickly through a hidden asteroid passage before attacking the convoy. The ships were dark, sharp, and shaped exactly like the Korth Dominion's scout destroyers. The video wasn't perfect, distorted by dust and debris, but it was clear enough to identify their movement style. Korth ships had a unique way of forming a triangle attack pattern. No other race used that maneuver because it required extremely strong engines and tight coordination. This was the third solid clue pointing towards the same culprit. Next, the intelligence team examined the escape pod logs. Every pod automatically recorded its surroundings. Dr. Lena's pod captured small flashes of the enemy ships as they fired their last shots. When zoomed and enhanced, the images revealed more details. A few symbols on the attacker ship's hulls matched ancient Korth military markings, symbols used by their older fleets. But one piece of evidence was stronger than all the rest. A damaged enemy engine coil was found drifting near the debris field. When scientists examined it, they confirmed it came from a Korth Dominion factory located on their outer moon, Vakar. That moon was known for producing advanced military technology. Only the Korth used those coils, and only their war fleets had access to them. With all these clues combined, the investigators were certain the attackers were from the Korth Dominion. There was no other possible answer. When the findings were presented to world leaders, the room fell silent. Some stared at the holographic displays with disbelief. Others clenched their jaws in anger. Targeting the Red Cross was not just a crime. It was a betrayal of one of the oldest and most respected galactic agreements. Every species, even hostile ones, understood the importance of protecting healers. The Terran Council sent diplomats to the Korth Dominion, demanding an explanation. They expected shock, apology, or at least concern. Instead, the Korth leaders coldly denied everything. They claimed the evidence was fake, the videos altered, and the wreckage planted. They refused to discuss the matter further and cut communication channels immediately. This reaction confused everyone. If the Korth were innocent, why would they refuse cooperation? Why reject dialogue so aggressively? Why hide behind silence? More intelligence reports came in. Spy satellites picked up unusual activity on Vakar, the same moon where the engine coils were manufactured. Strange power surges were detected, along with heavy ship traffic. It looked like the Korth were either preparing for war or covering their tracks. Neither explanation was comforting. Inside the Terran Defense Headquarters, tension grew. Generals whispered about the possibility that the Korth Dominion was testing humanity's limits. Scientists speculated that the attackers might be a rogue faction within the Korth military, rebels or extremists acting without permission. But there was no proof of that. And the Korth Emperor's silence made it even more suspicious. Meanwhile, the public demanded action. News broadcasts replayed Lena's testimony every hour. Citizens organized peaceful marches holding candles and Red Cross symbols. They wanted justice for the medics who died. They wanted assurance that such cruelty would never happen again. Dr. Lena watched all this from her recovery room. Her heart hurt every time she remembered the attack, but she was relieved that the truth was finally coming out. The people who targeted the convoy would not be able to hide behind lies. One thing was clear: Earth now knew exactly who had attacked their healers. And the galaxy was waiting to see what humanity would do next. As the truth about the Korth Dominion's involvement spread across the galaxy, the reaction was louder and angrier than anyone expected. It was not only humans who were shocked. Every species that had ever fought in wars or signed peace treaties understood one rule clearly: you never harm doctors, nurses, or medics. The Red Cross, no matter which world it came from, was always respected. Their ships were allowed to pass even through battle zones because every warrior knew that someday, they or their families might need the same help. So when it became clear that the Korth Dominion had attacked a humanitarian convoy on purpose, worlds across the galaxy reacted with disbelief and fury. Alien leaders made public statements calling the attack barbaric, heartless, and an insult to civilization. Even species who normally disliked humans agreed that this was unacceptable. The Korth Dominion had crossed a line so ancient and so important that no one knew what would happen next. Peaceful protests began on Earth, but they also happened on other planets. People carried floating lights and pictures of the lost Red Cross workers. In the streets, children placed flowers at memorial walls. Many had never met the medics, but they understood what they stood for: kindness and protection. Billboards across cities displayed messages saying, "Protect the healers," and "Never again." Inside the Terran Council chambers, tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. The council members listened to reports from diplomats and military advisors. One ambassador from the Vrylan species said, "If we allow this to go unanswered, we tell the galaxy that medics are no longer safe. That would be the beginning of chaos." Others nodded. They knew he was right. Earth's council made an official announcement declaring that the attack on the Red Cross was not just an attack on humans but an attack on every civilized species. They reminded the galaxy that Earth had always respected the laws of war, even during their darkest times. But now, that respect had been violated. Behind closed doors, high-ranking officials gathered to discuss what Earth should do. Many wanted to strike back immediately, but others warned that open war would bring too much destruction. The Korth Dominion was powerful, with a massive army and strict discipline. A full war could cost millions of lives. Earth did not want bloodshed, they wanted justice. That was when the idea for Operation Night Lantern was first whispered in the room. It was a plan that required precision, silence, and absolute control. Its purpose was simple: punish the Korth in a way they would never forget, but without harming innocent civilians or starting a galaxy-wide conflict. The plan would show the Dominion that humanity could reach them anytime, anywhere, yet still choose restraint. The Council agreed that such a message would be stronger than any explosion or returned fire. It would protect the galaxy's medics by making an example of those who broke the rules. But the operation had to remain secret, known only to a few. Meanwhile, many alien nations sent private messages supporting Earth's right to respond. Some offered help. Others warned the Korth privately that their actions had made them enemies of almost every civilized world. But the Korth Dominion did not seem to care. Their emperor made no statement. Their military ships continued to move in suspicious patterns around Vakar, their outer moon. Some species believed the Dominion was preparing for war. Others thought they were trying to hide evidence. Inside Earth's intelligence networks, specialists listened to intercepted Korth messages. They detected fear in the lower-ranking officers, but no one dared speak openly. The Dominion was strict, and its people trusted their emperor completely, even when he was wrong. Back on Earth, Normal people felt nervous, angry, and deeply protective of the Red Cross. News channels interviewed former medics who explained how the Red Cross had saved lives on hundreds of planets, including Korth worlds in the past. The irony was painful. Humanity had treated the Korth wounded in earlier conflicts, and now those same people had attacked the very hands that once healed them. Dr. Lena Arkwright, though still recovering, was invited to a small private meeting with the council. She was asked to confirm certain details, but they also wanted to reassure her that justice was coming. She saw determination in their eyes, not rage. That gave her hope. She didn't want revenge, she wanted safety for future healers. In the end, the galaxy realized something important. The Red Cross was not just a human symbol, it belonged to everyone who believed in compassion. And so, when Earth prepared its secret response, the galaxy watched silently, waiting for what would come next. The message would be powerful, and the Korth Dominion would soon learn that attacking healers was a mistake they would never be allowed to make again. Operation Night Lantern began in absolute silence. Only a small group of trusted commanders, scientists, and pilots even knew it existed. The rest of Earth had no idea what was about to happen. This mission was not like regular military operations. There would be no big fleets, no loud battles, no public announcements. The goal was simple: reach the Korth Dominion, show them Earth's power, and leave without harming civilians or starting a full war. It had to be fast, quiet, and impossible for the Korth to predict. A special Terran task force was chosen for the mission. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were experts in stealth technology and deep space operations. Their ships were equipped with experimental gravity-damping drives that could bend surrounding space just enough to hide from enemy scanners. It was like slipping through shadows that existed even in the darkness of space. The fleet consisted of 4 stealth ships, each designed to appear almost invisible. Their surfaces absorbed light instead of reflecting it, and their engines gave off almost no heat. From a distance, they looked like pieces of empty space moving slowly, blending into the stars. Every crew member had been trained to stay calm under pressure. They knew the mission was dangerous, but they also knew it was necessary. Someone had to send a message to the Korth Dominion, and Earth had chosen them. Their target was Vakar, the outer moon of the Korth homeworld. It wasn't just any moon. It held large factories, communication towers, shipyards, and a powerful supply station. More importantly, intelligence reports showed that the ships used to attack the Red Cross convoy came from this moon. It was the staging ground for the ambush. If the Dominion thought they could attack healers and hide behind their moon's defenses, they were wrong. The journey to Korth space took days. The stealth ships traveled silently, avoiding busy routes and known scanner zones. Sometimes they drifted near asteroid fields. Other times they powered down completely and coasted for hours to avoid detection. The crew barely spoke. They communicated mostly with hand signals or short whispered messages. Every sound felt too loud, even inside the ship. It was like sneaking past a sleeping giant. When they finally reached the Korth system, they moved even more carefully. The Korth had strong defenses, watchtowers floating in space, automated scanners, satellite webs, and patrol fleets. But the Terran ships were prepared. Using the gravity-damping drives, they passed under scanner beams and slipped between patrol routes. One wrong move could alert the entire Korth military, but the task force remained steady. Vakar appeared on their screens as a large gray moon covered in glowing buildings and massive structures. From space, it looked like a giant metal hive. The task force launched small recon drones, each the size of a bird. These drones were incredibly advanced. They could fly close to the moon's surface without being detected, capturing images and scanning for targets. The drones sent back disturbing information. They confirmed that the attackers' ships had been launched from Vakar's main military ports. More shocking was the amount of activity happening on the moon. Ships were being loaded with weapons, engines tested, and communication networks upgraded. It looked like the Dominion was preparing for something big. Whether it was another attack or a full war, no one knew. But this only made Operation Night Lantern more important. The Terran commanders studied the recon data and selected key targets: the communication hubs, the power grid centers, and the moon's energy cores. The goal was not to destroy the moon but to shut it down, plunging it into darkness without causing deaths. That was the message Earth wanted to send: power without cruelty, strength without blood. The final preparations were made. The task force armed the EMP cascade devices, which were special weapons designed to send massive waves of electromagnetic pulses. These pulses would disable machines, shut down lights, and stop all technology, but they would not harm living beings. At the exact planned moment, the stealth ships positioned themselves around Vakar. The moon continued its normal operations, unaware that deathly quiet shadows had surrounded it. The Korth Dominion believed their moon was safe, protected by layers of defenses and distance. They had no idea that Earth had reached their doorstep. The command was given. The EMP devices were launched silently, like falling stars with no trail. They descended toward Vakar's surface, aimed perfectly at every major power center. Within seconds, the moon would experience something it had never known before. And the Korth Dominion would soon learn that Earth did not need a war to show its power. The EMP cascade devices fell silently toward Vakar, almost invisible against the moon's gray surface. There were no warning sirens, no flashing lights, no alarms. The Korth Dominion had no idea that something dangerous was moving toward them. Their scanners detected nothing out of the ordinary. Workers went about their tasks, engineers walked across shipyard bridges, and technicians checked glowing screens, unaware that everything around them was about to change. Then the first EMP device activated. It released a pulse of invisible energy that rushed across the moon like a storm without wind. It hit electrical lines, power generators, engines, fuel pumps, and communication satellites all at once. In an instant, lights across the nearest district flickered, buzzed, and then went completely dark. Screens turned black. Machines stopped. Robots froze in the middle of their tasks. It was as if the moon had taken a deep, silent breath and forgotten how to breathe out. Before anyone could react, the second, third, and fourth EMP devices detonated too. Each pulse overlapped with the next, creating a massive wave that washed across the entire moon. Huge shipyards that once glowed with bright white lights dimmed slowly until nothing but darkness remained. Factories powered down with loud metallic clanks. Massive cranes stopped mid-motion, hanging like broken skeletons. Inside control towers, officers yelled in confusion as their panels shut off. Some officers slapped the screens, thinking it was a power glitch. Others ran to emergency controls, only to discover that those were dead too. Doors locked themselves, elevators froze, and surveillance drones fell from the sky like quiet stones. From the surface, the blackout spread so fast that entire cities vanished into darkness within minutes. The only light left came from the planet far below and the stars far above. Vakar, the proud military moon of the Korth Dominion, looked like a burnt-out ember floating in space. Down in the civilian quarters, panic began to rise. Families stepped out of their homes, looking at the sky where lights usually blinked from satellite grids. Now there was nothing. Children pointed at the dark shipyards and asked why the moon suddenly looked asleep. The adults didn't know how to answer. Up in orbit, the Terran stealth ships observed everything. Their screens showed Vakar going dark section by section until the moon was covered in shadow. The Terran commanders watched with steady faces. They had trained for this moment. They knew the importance of precision. No fires were spreading, no buildings collapsing, no innocent lives harmed. The operation was working exactly as planned. One of the ship captains whispered to himself, "For the healers," before turning away from the screen. On the Korth homeworld, the reaction was immediate. The people looked up at their moon, which had always glowed softly in the night sky. But tonight, it was a black circle. No lights. No signals. No movement. It looked like a giant hole had opened in the sky. The Korth Emperor was rushed to his command chamber. Generals shouted reports at him. Systems offline, moon unresponsive, communications dead, defenses silent. They didn't understand what had happened. They thought it was a natural disaster at first, then a massive internal failure. But the Emperor knew better. His instincts screamed that this was not an accident. Someone had reached the heart of his empire. Inside Vakar's dark command centers, Officers struggled to restart backup power. But the EMP pulses had been too strong, shutting down even the most protected circuits. They tried to send distress signals to the homeworld, but every transmitter was fried. For the first time in their history, the Korth Dominion's most important military base was completely cut off. Meanwhile, the Terran task force prepared to leave. They did not fire a single weapon at the Korth people. They did not destroy ships or buildings. They simply turned off the moon. That was enough. The Terran command vessel sent one message directly to the Korth Emperor. It was short and simple. No threats, no insults, no long speeches. The message said only that Earth protected its medics, and that attacking healers would never go unanswered. Then the stealth ships turned away and vanished into the darkness, leaving Vakar powerless and silent. The Korth Dominion had been humbled, not by violence, but by precision. Their moon, once a symbol of strength, now floated like a dark warning in the sky. A warning the galaxy would never forget. When Vakar went dark, the Korth Dominion fell into panic. Their military moon had never lost power before, not even during earlier wars. It was protected by layers of shields, backup generators, emergency systems, and elite soldiers. Yet now, everything was silent. No lights, no signals, no engines. Just a giant black shadow hanging in space above the Korth homeworld. The Korth Emperor watched the dark moon from his balcony, rage and fear twisting inside him. Nothing frightened the Korth as much as losing control, and tonight, control had been ripped away from them. Suddenly, a chime echoed through his command hall. One communication channel had come alive, not from Vakar, but from a hidden source far outside the system. The Emperor ordered the message to be played. His generals stood behind him, tense and alert, unsure what to expect. The screen flickered and showed the face of General Mara Esteban of the Terran Alliance. She looked calm, firm, and completely unafraid. Behind her, there were no flags, no threatening symbols, no soldiers. She stood alone, which made her presence somehow even stronger. She gave a respectful nod before speaking. "Emperor of the Korth Dominion," she began softly. "You attacked healers." Her voice carried no anger, but it held the weight of truth. "Your forces targeted the Red Cross. You killed doctors, nurses, and volunteers who came only to save lives. This act breaks the oldest promise shared by every civilized world." The generals shifted uncomfortably. They had been trained since childhood to believe the Dominion was powerful and unstoppable. Yet the dark moon above them said otherwise. General Esteban continued, "Tonight, we brought darkness to Vakar. Not to harm your people, but to show you that Earth can reach your strongest defenses without firing a single deadly weapon." Another image flashed on the screen, a visual of Vakar taken from Terran sensors. It looked like a ghost moon, dead and powerless. The Emperor's hands tightened around the armrests of his throne. The message was clear. Earth had walked into his territory, touched his most secure military base, and left without losing a single ship. General Esteban then delivered the final line, the one that would echo across the Empire for years. "Earth protects its healers. Strike our medics again, and the next nightfall will not be temporary." The screen went black. For a long moment, no one moved. The generals stared at the Emperor, waiting for his command. Anger burned in his eyes, but beneath it was something the Korth never admitted: fear. Not fear of death, but fear of humiliation. Fear of losing respect. Fear of looking weak in front of the galaxy. Inside the Korth military headquarters, officers whispered to each other. They knew what the message meant. Earth had shown restraint. They could have destroyed Vakar. They could have killed thousands. But they chose not to. Instead, they delivered a warning wrapped in darkness. A warning stronger than any weapon. On the streets of the Korth homeworld, people gathered outside, staring into the sky. Families pointed at the moon and whispered rumors. Some said it was a natural disaster. Others said it was a secret experiment gone wrong. But many believed the truth. Someone had punished the Dominion for an unforgivable act. The Emperor knew he had no choice left. If he retaliated, Earth and its allies would respond with full force, and the Dominion would fall. If he ignored the warning, other species might take advantage of the situation. And if he admitted guilt, his own people would question his strength. His pride battled against logic, but in the end, the weight of Vakar's silence crushed his pride. Without making a public announcement, he ordered an immediate withdrawal of all Korth fleets from neutral territories. Secret messages were sent to their military bases: do not engage Earth. Avoid all humanitarian ships. However, he refused to admit responsibility or apologize. His ego would not allow it. Across the galaxy, Earth's message spread quietly but powerfully. Alien leaders watched the situation closely. They saw that humanity had not acted with violence, but with discipline. They saw that Earth had defended the sacred rule that medics must always be safe. Respect for humanity grew. Even former enemies admitted, privately, that Earth's response was brilliant. General Esteban returned to Earth with her task force. She did not celebrate. She simply saluted her crew, knowing they had done what needed to be done. They had defended the healers who could no longer defend themselves. Dr. Lena Arkwright watched the news from her recovery center. When she heard the message sent to the Korth Emperor, tears filled her eyes. Not tears of sadness this time, but of relief and pride. Her fallen friends had not been forgotten. Their loss had changed the galaxy. Earth had spoken on behalf of its healers. And every empire in the galaxy had listened. After Vakar went dark and the Terran task force vanished into deep space, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. No one knew what the Korth Dominion would do next. Would they retaliate? Would they pretend nothing had happened? Or would they finally understand the message Earth had sent? In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. The Korth fleets slowly pulled back from disputed borders. Ships that were once aggressive and threatening now moved cautiously, avoiding humanitarian lanes. Their patrols stopped harassing neutral ships. It was as if the entire Dominion had suddenly remembered how fragile their power was. Across space, this change did not go unnoticed. The Vrylan Alliance, the Surin Collective, the Talari Federation, and dozens of other species watched carefully. Each of them had their own Red Cross-type organizations. Each had healers who risked their lives in war zones. So when Earth stood up for its medics, it felt like Earth had stood up for everyone's medics. Alien governments quietly contacted Earth's council. They offered gratitude and respect, not with loud speeches, but with private messages that meant far more. Some said, "Your actions saved not only humans, but all healers." Others said, "The galaxy needed someone brave enough to defend the old rules." A few even admitted, "We would not have dared do what you did." Meanwhile, within the Korth Dominion, confusion and fear spread like a slow storm. Their people had always believed their empire was untouchable. But when they saw their mighty moon powerless in the sky, they began to question everything. Some wondered if their emperor had failed them. Others whispered that attacking healers had been a dishonorable act. Even Korth warriors, trained to show no emotion, felt uneasy. Despite this, the Korth government refused to make any public statement. They neither admitted guilt nor blamed anyone else. But their actions spoke louder than words. They quietly signed agreements with neutral inspectors, promising that all humanitarian ships would be safe in any region controlled by the Dominion. They agreed to allow Red Cross vessels full access to war zones. They even allowed alien observers to monitor their military routes, something they had never allowed before. For the first time, the Korth Dominion acted like a nation afraid of consequences. These new rules spread to the Galactic Council, where representatives from many species met to discuss future safety. With Earth guiding the discussion, they created a strong, universal law. Any attack on a medical convoy would be treated as a crime against all species, not just one. Every nation promised to protect healers. Every fleet was ordered to recognize humanitarian symbols. The Red Cross became more than a symbol of humans. It became a symbol of the galaxy. Back on Earth, the story of the Red Cross attack and Earth's response became known everywhere. News networks replayed the message General Esteban had sent to the Korth Emperor. Children in schools learned about the brave medics who died. Statues were built in their honor, showing them not as victims, but as heroes who changed the galaxy. People spoke their names with respect. Their sacrifice had made space safer for every future medic. Dr. Lena Arkwright was invited to speak to the Terran Council again, this time not as a victim but as a survivor whose testimony changed history. She spoke calmly about her lost team, about their dedication, and about the importance of protecting those who heal. When she finished, the entire council stood and applauded. Many had tears in their eyes. Later, Lena visited the memorial built for the fallen convoy. It was a large garden filled with white stones, each one carrying the name of a medic or volunteer. She walked between them slowly, touching the smooth surfaces. The breeze was cool and the sky above was clear. For the first time since the attack, she felt peace. A group of young volunteers approached her. They were new members of the Red Cross, inspired by the story. One of them asked, "Do you think it's safe for us out there now?" Lena looked up at the sky, remembering the burning ships, the silent escape pod, and the dark moon of Vakar. Then she smiled gently. "It's safer than it has ever been," she replied, "because the galaxy finally understands something important. Those who heal must never be harmed. And now, everyone knows what happens when someone forgets that." In the years that followed, no civilization dared attack a humanitarian convoy again. Vakar's dark night became a lesson taught in military academies and diplomatic schools across the stars. They called it the Night of Warning, a reminder that strength should protect life, not destroy it. Humanity had spoken for the healers. And the galaxy never forgot.